Hello again, fellow audiophiles. I am Wave Theory, and hey, you might be seeing double right now. That's right, this is the Fosi Audio i5. Why do I have two of them? Well, a few weeks ago, I reviewed the Fosi Audio i5 in its original form, and I and many other reviewers commented that it has a pretty sharp roll-off in the really deep bass, and frequency response measurements have since borne that out. There is a very sharp roll-off in presence below about 70 Hz on the original Fosi i5. Fosi was very responsive to that, and they came up with a fix to that roll-off in the form of putting a sound isolator ring around the driver, which we'll talk more about here in a moment. Well, I wanted to know if that fix actually meant something, so I talked to them about getting a second unit in, and they asked me, like, well, do you want a whole new unit, or do you just want the isolation rings to install yourself? I opted for a whole new unit because I wanted to be able to switch back and forth between them rapidly to hear the differences in a quick A-B switch like that. So that's why I have two units. So, did Fosi fix that bass issue, and what impact does that have on the overall sound? Stick around right after Shameless self-promotion to find out.
Hi, it's me again, 14 months later and a whole foot taller. Now, since Wave Theory liked the first 10,000 subscriber play button I made him, maybe he wants a 25,000 subscriber play button. This can only happen if you subscribe, though. Now, since over 60% of the watch time comes from unsubscribed viewers, I'm going to need you to subscribe. You can also sign up for his Patreon or send him money in PayPal. Links in the description. Now, on to the video.
Alright, a couple of quick disclaimers here. Fosi Audio, again, they've sent me two units. As far as I know, I get to keep them. And they also asked me to put an affiliate link where you can buy this down in the description below. So I'm going to do that. I only use affiliate link money to keep the channel running. But you do have my word to be as honest and fair in my evaluation as I can be, regardless of the financial incentive there. And again, I already commented on the original unit that there's a pretty severe bass roll-off in the sound. Fosi recognized that, and because of both what I said and several others, and they had measurements to bear that out, and they have acted to fix that. Okay, you can still... You order this from Kickstarter still, so the link down below that is an affiliate link for me is to Kickstarter. The project is fully funded, so we're in the late start session there. The starting package is just over $400 US at the time of this filming. It's 408, something like that, right around in there. All right, so, and then there are other package options with like cable upgrades and that sort of thing that you can opt into with a little bit more money. So, those will be shipping soon, as far as I know. I'm going to get this out as quick as I can after the filming of this, so that you have as much time as possible to get in on those late start deals. Okay, so let's talk about the fix that Fosi did to this. So the pads on the headphone, I'm not going to go through the whole build and all of that, but the pads on the headphone just Velcro on, and so with just a little bit, not much effort, they can peel right off, and then you see the driver on the inside there. Okay, so this is the original right here, and I want you to look in this area, and specifically, you see nothing, right? It's just Velcro right there. Well, the new unit, the fixed unit, or the sealed unit, whatever you want to call it, okay, has this right here. We have this like rubber gasket-like ring that just goes around the driver opening. And one thing that I can see already is that it's not necessarily the most firmly mounted thing. So when you take the pads on and off, okay, be careful about how it sits in there. But, okay, there is that ring in there around the driver opening there on the front that helps with the seal. Okay, so the reason the bass, the deep bass, was rolling off so aggressively on the original unit is because the seal from the pad was not very great. And so because of the Velcro in there, right? Like the Velcro seemed to be the issue, at least in terms of the communications that I have had with Fosi. They think that was the primary problem. And so then putting those little rubber gaskets in there creates a better seal around the driver there, in which, you know, in headphone world, when you get a good solid seal up against the side of the head, the bass performance tends to at least not become more potent. Like if you break the seal, you'll often get more bass, but what you get is like a really sharp peak in the frequency response of the bass if the headphone is not properly sealed, and that can really hurt the bass extension and that sort of thing. So that was the fix that they did. And their internal frequency response measurements, which I'll go ahead and put up on the screen here, do show that that roll-off has basically disappeared. You do lose just a little bit of a hump centered around about 70, 80 hertz in the bass, but in exchange for that, you get nice linear extension all the way down to 20 hertz, at least according to their measurements there. And so, I mean, that's the fix right there. The other thing that you see from this frequency response plot is that the mid-range in about the 500 up to about 1,000 hertz, so about 1 to 1.2 kilohertz in between in that range, does get just a little bit more ragged on the original or on the sealed variant here than the original did. So, like, can you hear all of these things? What is this like sonically? Does that change the value proposition of the headphone? That's what we're going to talk about for the remainder of this video here. If you have questions about what the build is like, what the fit and the comfort is like, and all of that kind of stuff, what the drivability is like, go back and watch my review of the original variant, which I will put a link to down in the description. We'll cover all of that. Let's just talk about the sound here of the new unit as compared to the old here for the remainder of this video. All right, I did not test this on nearly as wide a range of source gear as I normally do. Again, I wanted to get this out a little bit more on the quick side. And then also, really the important thing here is just the comparison between the two variants, what changed. So primarily to test this, I used some of the best stuff that I have on hand to do that, okay? Digital music files through Roon, lossless or high-res FLAC files or DSD files, again, all played through Roon. A Roon endpoint would have been a Sonor Ultra Rendu streamer. That's currently going through a Vice Audio INT204 DDC, and then into my Berkeley Alpha Series 2 DAC, and then into my LTA Z10E headphone amplifier. And I used an audiophile Ninja Vanish series cable, dual 3.5 millimeter, to swap it back and forth between these two, with a 4.4 millimeter to a 1/4 inch adapter to go into the Z10E. Okay, so to the big question, did they fix the bass issue? By and large, yes, I think they did. You see it on the frequency response plots they provided, but my ears do back up a lot of what they're hearing here. Like the telling test, if you will, is the track Why So Serious by Hans Zimmer from the Dark Knight film soundtrack. It's a test that I use as a torture test for bass presence, bass performance, and particularly in the really, really deep bass. And what I heard here from the sealed variant of the i5 is that the extension and the presence is definitely improved over the original. It does reach down pretty deep down there. Now, it is not an elevated bass shelf. These do not suddenly become bass cannons, but what you do get is a fair amount of rumble and grunt and a nice even extension all the way down below to what humans can hear. That Why So Serious track, again, it is a torture test in the deep bass. This headphone with the sealed variant, it was nice and clean, not necessarily powerful or potent, but it was definitely present. There was more rumble than the original had. There was better pitch definition. The subtle changes in frequency down that low in that synthesized bass portion of that track that happens at about 3 minutes and 30 seconds in. Okay, the new variant, the sealed variant, did a much better job of resolving those subtle pitch variations and doing it with more authority than the original version did and all of that. Again, not subwoofer on your head kind of bass levels, but much improved there to the point where the bass extension on the i5 is now no longer a weakness of its sonic profile. I wouldn't necessarily call it a strength. The extension is a strength. length, just the raw extension, but the presence, if you're looking for a subwoofer on your head kind of bass performance, it's still not there. It's just a much more even tone, and again, well extended into the deepest regions. All right. What about the consequences in the other parts of the frequency spectrum here? Because as we already saw on that graph, the mid-range from about 500 hertz to about 1.1, 1.2 kilohertz, right around in there, gets a little bit more ragged than the original variant. And I could hear that too. The sealed version here gets a little bit more shouty to my ears a little bit more often. And what I mean by shouty is that the ow sound in shout becomes a little bit more prominent with the new variant than the old. Now, neither of them I would label as shouty headphones in a general sense. It's just that with certain vocalists and on certain tracks that can tend towards my ears picking up shoutiness. And I should also drop here that I tend to be a little bit more sensitive to and intolerant of shoutiness in the mid-range of my headphones, okay, or any audio, even in speakers if it happens there. Okay, even with that, like the new variant crosses over into shouty territory a little bit more often than the original variant did, but it's still not horrible, right? I don't think many people out there are going to really notice or be bothered by that, but there is just a little bit more mid-range presence too. So vocals have a little bit more forwardness to them on the new variant. Acoustic instruments that have a lot of energy in that range, which is, a lot of them. Pianos, acoustic guitars, stringed instruments, brass, okay, woodwinds, there's just a lot of sound in that 500 to 1.2 kilohertz range. A lot of music lives there. And that entire range is just slightly more forward perceptibly on the sealed variant than it is on the original variant there. That has a couple of consequences. One, the sound seems a little bit closer in. Like I like to use this analogy because I think it's helpful. If you go to a symphony performance in a concert hall, a performance hall kind of thing, it's like where you're sitting in the audience. The original i5 is just a little bit further back in the audience away from the orchestra than the new variant is. So the new variant brings it in just a little bit closer. I also think that the sound stage sounds a little bit like it's narrower. And I don't know that it's because the actual boundaries of the sound stage have actually come in. That's probably not the case, but just because of the added mid-range presence, it does feel like things are moved towards the center image just a little bit more on the sealed variant than on the original variant. That's not a complaint. That's not necessarily a problem. I'm just stating that that's the way my ears hear it. Just kind of take it or leave it. It's going to be up to you whether or not that's good or bad. Another thing about it is that slight bit of more perceptive mid-range in it is that detail retrieval comes forward just a little bit on the new variant as compared to the original variant. So all of those instruments that I just named in there, like if there's ever like a ghost note on a drum or something, or a double hit on any kind of percussive thing, the sound of fingers plucking strings, or the zizzy sound of bows being dragged across a violin string or a viola string or something like that. Like those kinds of details are a little bit more forward in the presentation on the sealed variant than they are the original variant. Again, just because that mid-range presence is a little bit more forward. So also put room reverbs in there, like vocal echoes off a back wall, or any echo off a back wall from those instruments that I just named. They are just a little bit more forward in the presentation. Now, the new variant is not more resolving. They have the same drivers in them, the same planar membranes, and like all of that kind of stuff is the same. So the driver moving in response to the signal is the same for each one. It's just that change in seal changes the frequency response enough that the details that are already there through that like 500 to 1.2 kilohertz range just gets brought forward just a little bit more. And so there's just a slight bit more perception of detail retrieval on the new variant than there is the original. Again, not saying that's good or bad, correct, incorrect. That's just a thing that you, the buyer, potential buyer, would need to be aware of going into this. All right, the last comment to make here is I compared the original variant to the HiFiMan Ananda Nano, which I still have right here, which is currently $420 US, and is kind of my reference in that price range. And the Nano is still more V-shaped in its signature than even the new variant, the sealed variant of the i5 is. So the new i5 still doesn't quite have the bass presence or impact that the Nano brings. That is a particular strength of the Nano. However, like for whatever reason, the HiFiMan Ananda Nano is a very potent headphone in the bass, right? It just is. It's well extended, lots of grunt and rumble in the sub bass. It's hard hitting. It is a very standout headphone for that trait at any price, really. It's just one of the better ones out there at those particular traits. The sealed i5 is not that level, okay? So that's something to keep in mind. The treble presence on the Ananda Nano, though, is definitely also more than either of the i5 variants, and it's also a little bit peakier. So the i5, at least the new variant, the old one had this too, is a little bit more tonally smooth through the treble, so cymbal crashes and that sort of thing still sound a little bit more natural in tone and timbre because of that, and it's also like less fatiguing if you get like a lot of rapid fire cymbal hits like you can get in like punk rock and heavy metal and that sort of thing in there. So that's something to be aware of as well. On balance, though, like the mid-range tuning on the Nano to my ears is still a little bit better than either of the i5s. It's a little bit more tonally even, more natural relationships between fundamental frequencies and their harmonics, but the entirety of the mid-range range is just less in perceived presence as compared to the bass and the treble on the Nano, and then also on the i5. Like, so the i5s are a little bit more mid-range focused in comparison to the Nano. The vocals have more weight and presence and all of that to them. So that's something that some people are going to be looking at as well and, need to be aware of. Okay. I preferred the Nano overall. On balance, I preferred the Nano easily to the original i5. With the seal on there, the sealed i5 closes that gap for me, closes the enjoyment gap, I should say. I still might slightly personally prefer the overall sonic package of the HiFiMan Ananda Nano, but the sealed i5 has gotten closer and to me represents a little bit better value than the original i5 does, because I think that deep bass presence does round out the entirety of the presentation and just make the overall sonic presentation a little bit more balanced, a little bit more real, and a little bit more believable to me. All right, so I think that the seal on there, the sealing rings, are a good move. The changes are rather subtle, other than that deep bass presence, which is pretty obvious if you play really bassy, deep bass music, right? The other stuff like that I was talking about with the mid-range and the soundstage size and the detail retrieval, the perception of it anyway, becoming a little bit more forward and that sort of thing. Those are all subtle. Took me a while to tease out. They are there, but they are subtle. So, like, it's not huge differences, but they are, you add up enough small differences, and it does create a meaningful overall improvement, at least to my ears in there. But your mileage may vary. I just thought you should know. Now, Fosi Audio has told me in the past that if you are in the Kickstarter program, that when they begin shipping, you will have your choice as to whether or not you want the original version or the sealed variant. I hope they follow through on that. We'll see. And I hope that these videos will help you make an informed decision on that. Jumping in again real quick after the fact, just talking into my phone here, because I had a thought about whether or not Fosi offers the two variants to buyers is really kind of irrelevant. As in, like, are they going to give you the choice between the original or the sealed? doesn't really matter. My recommendation is going to be take the sealed, because as you just saw, you can just pull those rubber rings right out of there. Okay, and just go back to the original version with that. So get the new one, try it, undo the Velcro on the pads, remove the sealing rings, put the pads back on, listen, okay? Then switch back and just go with the one that you want. It just doesn't hurt to get the new one, do that switch yourself, and see what happens. So that's just a thought that I wanted to add that I thought of after the fact. Thanks for giving me a moment to say that. So I will go ahead and wrap it up there. So I'm Wave Theory. These have been my thoughts on the new sealed Fosi i5 planar magnetic headphone. Please remember to like, subscribe, and comment. If you haven't yet, check out my PayPal and my Patreon. Generally do those things you do to support YouTube channels. And as always, enjoy the music.